On the 18th of April, 1924, a firefighter named Frank Levy was washing a window at the fire station. For some reason, he paused in his work, his hand resting against the pane of glass, and he told a friend who was standing nearby that he had the strangest feeling he was going to die that day. Just then, the station received an alarm call and the firefighters were sent to a fire that had broken out in Curran Hall, an office building in Chicago. While fighting the fire, a wall collapsed and killed 8 of the firemen. Frank Levy was one of those killed. The next day, one of the firemen noticed something strange about the window that Frank had been washing the day before. There seemed to be an unusual stain on the glass, and it appeared to be the imprint of Frank's hand at the same spot where he had been leaning the day before. They tried everything that they could, but they could find no way to erase the strange handprint. It seemed to be etched into the glass. An expert from the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company brought a special solution to the Firehouse, guaranteeing that it would remove the print, but it didn't work. Over the years, there were suggestions that the pane of glass be removed, but many of the firemen argued, saying that it was not right to fool with the unknown. Besides that, it was a reminder, albeit a grim one, of their dead friend. And there was no doubt that the handprint belonged to Frank Levy. An official from the city had come down with a fingerprint comparison, and the prints matched those of Frank's. For the next 20 years, the handprint defied all explanation and was a common attraction to visitors and other firemen from around the city. Finally, on the morning of the 18th of April, 1944, a careless paperboy tossed the morning edition at the firehouse and shattered the window where Frank's handprint had been. It happened exactly 20 years to the date of when Frank Levy died. I'm always skeptical of haunt stories because I've known some folks who like to spin a good yarn. Besides, I've had creepy things happen, but I've never really seen or heard anything. It takes a lot to get me to think about the paranormal. One time, I was asleep on the bay floor of one of my stations. We don't have a bunk room there. And I heard someone walking around in the dark by my head. I wondered if something was wrong, so I said, "Hello? Who's there?" And the walking stopped. I felt kind of weird laying there with someone standing there, silently in the dark bay, so I turned on the light, and no one was around. Another time in a different station, I was going to bed around 2 AM. Everyone was either gone or asleep, and I was going through the engine bay, shutting down the lights and making sure everything was secure. As I walked past the engine, I heard footsteps and saw a man in white bunker pants out of the corner of my eye. Trying to justify why he was there, I speculated that he had come from another fire department looking for someone, because we don't have white bunkers here. When I turned around, there was no one in sight, and there was no way this person could have left the bay without me seeing and hearing them. That one was creepy. Another time, my friend and I were in the bunk room getting ready to sleep. The sun is out 24 hours a day, so you can see everything. We heard the doorknob rattle, and I looked up in time to see the knob turn and the door slowly open. Expecting a firefighter to be there, we almost peed our pants when we saw nothing but the hallway. The doorknob straightened out after the door finished opening, and we sat there, staring like a pair of dogs. We tried so hard to justify what had happened, but we could not explain away the dang doorknob. After having these things happen, I felt better knowing I had a witness, and we ended up enjoying a few other creepy things together in that bunk room. A person talking, going, "Psst," and laughing, all when the fire station is totally empty except for us. It happens when people are here too, but we can explain the creepy noises away then. We are now so freaked out that we refuse to be alone in that bunk room or in the bays at night. We use the buddy system. We told one firefighter about this and she laughed at us and called us nuts, so we don't tell anyone about our creepy stories. At the time of this particular accident, I had just been recruited into the local fire rescue department of the town I lived in as a volunteer. It was my first very bad call, and one I wouldn't soon forget. It was January of 2014. I don't remember the time because after the tone went out, everything, including myself, moved in a blur. I was just a greenhorn at this point and hadn't had any experience with the kind of situation I was about to be plunged into. So naturally, my adrenaline was spiked by just the sound of the tone from my pager. The next thing I heard after the tone turned my blood to pure ice, it was a two-vehicle head-on MVA, motor vehicle accident, a double fatal with 2 patients dead. As said before, my blood turned to ice, and my heart jumped into my throat. As I was en route to the scene, with my dash lights on the get the hell out of my way mode, I made sure to keep a steady pace as the roads were covered in slush. I remember how frantic the red and white flashing of my dash lights illuminated the dark blue winter sky around the front of my truck, and how the snow fell lightly, as if it were in slow motion. It wasn't long before I had made it to the scene. Due to the severity of the accident, the chief had called for the road to be closed, and I had to park my truck in a gas station's parking lot, where I was met with gawkers who wanted to know what happened or were trying to get through, claiming they lived on the road the accident was on. Most of these claims were lies. Most of them just wanted to see a body. Damn vultures, I thought to myself, and spat into the snowbank I parked behind. As I got out of my truck and got the rest of my gear on, I looked ahead to see all of the apparatus that blocked the road. I lowered my head for a few moments while I walked, preparing myself for what awaited ahead of me. Just as I was walking toward the accident area, my lieutenant stopped me and asked me to block traffic on the side street that would lead right into the accident area. I agreed after he handed me a radio. I quickly turned around and began walking quickly back to my truck, and once I got there, I started it up, turned my dash lights back on, and was allowed through the barricade. I really wished I'd been told how far to go, because all too soon, I drove up to the collision scene by mistake and saw the 2 vehicles. It was bad. I stopped for a few seconds. I was frozen. The vehicles were mangled and I could make out just how bad the damage was. I quickly put the truck in reverse and backed up the road I was supposed to block. It was solid ice. What happened next shook me to the bone. I positioned my truck so it would sit across the road, blocking it off, and as I shifted my truck into park, it shut off. I looked over the driver's side window and saw what appeared to be a woman who was undeniably distraught and racked with grief. I felt horrible for her. I then leaned over to make sure my dash lights were still switched on. When I sat back upright, I turned to see if she was still there so I could go and try to help her. She was gone. There's no way she's that damn fast, I said to myself, looking around out of the driver's window. I got out of the truck and made my way cautiously down the ice-covered road. As I did, I looked for the woman, but never saw her. I remember being startled by her appearance. She was very pale, almost gaunt. She looked as if she were nearly dead. She never once looked directly at me, but from what I could make out, her teary eyes seemed to be fixed and vacant. She certainly had a 1,000-yard stare. Her hollow, tear-filled eyes and grief-stricken expression haunted me for days. I kept looking for her as I redirected drivers who thought they'd sneak a look by going down the little ice-covered road. After I had succeeded to tick off what seemed to be like the 100th driver, I turned around to face the direction of the accident. It wasn't much longer before I saw an ambulance coming down the road with lights and sirens wailing. The ambulance passed and my gaze followed. What I saw made my heart stop. I saw a female laying on the stretcher in the back of the ambulance and others who I assumed were medics working on her. She was in bad shape, bleeding and pale. Every hair on my neck stood on end. My head went numb and my body felt cold. I prayed with all my being that it wasn't the lady I had just seen walking minutes ago. To my relief, it wasn't. This was confirmed by radio traffic that the patient in that particular ambulance was stable and being taken to a nearby hospital. After about 30 minutes of standing there alone and sending an occasional text to my then girlfriend, now fiancée, a news reporter came driving up to me, just as chipper as could be. "Hey, where's the scene of the crash?" I looked at him, bewildered. "You can't look up the road and see the lights from the fire apparatus and the police cruisers?" I wanted to say, but kept it in my head and just silently glared at him and pointed where he needed to go, as if the Gawkers weren't bad enough. I still don't like to see the news crew on any scene to this day. Once I had sent the cameraman on his merry way, I found myself alone once more, but not for long. After a while, a man with the same vacant stare came walking on the opposite side of the road and opposite the direction the woman was going. He was less distraught than her, but seemed more lost, as if he didn't know where he was going. Since he was coming the opposite way, I assumed he was a relative of the deceased and let him pass without confrontation. We didn't leave the scene for 7 hours, but once we were cleared and back to the station, I asked about the man and the woman. I got looks like they had no idea what I was talking about. One of them told me nobody else left or entered the crash site. My stomach rolled. We filled out paperwork and talked for a while before I finally called it a night. As I made my way out of the station, I saw the blackboard standing against the outside wall near the garden hose. It still had blood on it. I turned away, walked back to my truck, got in, and walked home. The next morning, I checked Facebook to see what everyone was doing. I had scrolled maybe halfway down the page when I saw a friend of mine had posted a rest in peace for the 2 people who had died the night before. I messaged her, asking who they were and how she knew about it since she lived in a different state. She said they were the parents of a friend of hers. I asked her what they looked like, and she sent me a picture of them and their kid. The 2 people I saw walking were the mother and the father. I was shaken for days after. At my old apartment, we had a large hotel we responded to frequently. It was built in the late 1800s. A large part burnt down in the 1920s, so much of it was rebuilt at that time. During that fire, several firefighters were killed during the fire. Being an old creepy hotel, odd noises were common, and there were stories of kitchen staff seeing weird things when alone, etc. All the fun ghost stories that go with 100-year-old buildings, but no one really took any seriously. One night, there was a call in the building around midnight. While investigating a smoke odor, One of the captains and firefighter went up to a lounge on the 4th floor and then hit up the bell tower, another 2 flights of stairs. It was a hot night, and after climbing up all those stairs in full gear, plus high-rise packs, they were cooking. All the doors to the balcony in the lounge were closed and locked, because the 4th floor was having some major construction, so there were no guests staying on the floor. When they came back down from the tower a few minutes later, they felt a very welcome, cool breeze in the lounge. All the doors to the outside were propped open with a nice sea breeze coming in. There was still nobody around. When they got back to the front desk to report that they had not found anything, they told the clerk to thank whoever had opened the doors for them. He replied none of his staff had been there since there were only a couple on that late, and he knew where they were. Later, they were asking the other firefighters if one of them had done it, and all denied opening the doors. So it went down in the department's tales as an assist from one of the fallen firefighters from the fire in the 20s. I personally know the captain who was involved. He is not a storyteller or a prankster, and he still stands by the story today.